The views and opinions expressed by the following program are those of the host, guests, and callers and are not necessarily those of this station or Webster Rock Hill Ministries, its management, or other hosts or underwriting sponsors. Programs presented by KWRH-LP are for educational and entertainment purposes only.
Welcome to In Tune. We're glad to have you with us today. We have an exciting show. This is Arnold Stricker with
Ellie Wharton.
And In Tune's a 2-hour weekly broadcast which focuses and reflects on issues that impact and connect our community and the greater St. Louis area. We talk about the arts, crime, education, employment, faith, finance, food, history, housing, humor, and justice. So today we have an interesting show, and the more I read the prep on this, the more I was like, this is another hidden gem of St. Louis that has yet to be discovered by people and maybe has been an often ignored memorial in a very distinguished part of our city and a very a large focal point of our city. So we're talking about the Soldiers Memorial, and it's been undergoing a 2-year renovation on this 80-year-old landmark. It's being revitalized. It's set to reopen on November 3rd, 2018, which is a very famous day. And it's this 2-year, $30 million renovation. It's a state-of-the-art museum facility. Will honor our military service members, our veterans, their families, and it's going to be under the operational leadership of the Missouri Historical Society. So because of that, in studio right now, we have Jim Conrad, who is project manager from Mackey Mitchell Architects. We also have Erik Biggs, who is from Mackey Mitchell Architects. He's the project architect. We have Karen Goering, who is from the Missouri Historical Society. She's the managing director of administration and operations and has been kind of this, I'm going to say this, spearheading all of the history portion that goes into this particular memorial. So I would like to welcome you all here to In Tune this morning.
Thank you.
So Jim, tell us a little bit about this particular kind of project and how Mackey Mitchell came about getting the responsibility to renovate this facility, and we'll talk about the renovation, and then we're going to bounce back and forth with Karen as some of those things kind of interact, and then we're going to talk with Karen specifically about the artifacts and the things themselves. And we'll mix a lot of that stuff together, folks. So just be prepared for this. We're going to go this hour. We may go into the 12 o'clock hour. We're not quite sure. So we'll just kind of let it go and see what happens. So, Jim, how did Mackey Mitchell get to be involved in this project?
Yes, thank you. First of all, a little bit more introduction. Mackey Mitchell Architects, downtown St. Louis. So our firm is in an office just to the west of Busch Stadium. And it's a very good location for this project because we're just a few blocks away from the site, and Erik and I have been there many times, just, had a free noon hour, and we're able to walk over and watch the progress. So to answer your question, a few years ago, our founder, Gene Mackey III, who has since passed away, received a call from one of our local citizens who was a veteran, was at the building and called Gene and said, Gene, this is just a great place, but it really needs some help. Are you interested in taking a look at it with us? So, of course, Gene said yes. And when Gene brought it up in our office, I raised my hand and said, hey, can I be involved too? So over the past few years, we've gone through a number of steps to prepare for the renovation. First, we started with the general building assessment to see, what's good about the building, what needs help. We had a number of consultants who helped us understand, what we needed to do in terms of improving the exhibits and also accessibility, as you mentioned, to people with disabilities. So Karen and I can give you a little bit more specific information about that as our interview goes on. But that, in a nutshell, is how we became involved. And then it's just been an honor, at least in my career. It's certainly been a high point in over 40 years of being an architect.
Now, I know that when you approach this project, you do an assessment of the current needs and what's good, what's not so good. It's a beautiful and a really solid, as it appears, Art Deco building. It's built very solidly, and I guess limestone
and granite.
Okay, but inside there's some things that have kind of deteriorated. But there's mosaics in there. There's brass doors. There's just unbelievable kinds of sculptures on the outside, stone sculptures, and elaborate on a little bit more of those kinds of features, and then how you approach an official quote-unquote renovation.
Sure. We should give credit to the city of St. Louis, who is the owner of Soldiers Memorial. With the resources that they have had, they've actually kept the building in good shape. So when we first started our assessment, the first thing we looked at was the general building condition. There was some rain getting in, so we identified that as an issue. The building was so well designed and built. The architects back in the 1930s did a wonderful job. It is very, as you said, very sturdily built, and over the years, that's really helped keep it in a good condition. The other need that we saw right away was the building lacked an efficient and functional heating, ventilating, and air conditioning system. So in the wintertime, the steam heat overheated the space. In the summertime, the building has never had air conditioning, so they would open the windows for ventilation, but then 90 degrees outside became 90 degrees inside. The other thing we saw was a lack of fire protection system. The building was never sprinklered. And as you mentioned, not accessible to people with disabilities. So those were just very basic things that we had identified that needed to be improved upon. Then beyond that, we also worked with a local contractor to help us understand what fixes to those conditions may be, which allowed us to identify some preliminary budgets.
So, as I look back on some information here, unique metalwork of the windows and doorways were cleaned and preserved. Decorative plasterwork on the ceilings been restored. And plasterwork is very, very, to find a good plasterer, I know one, I live near one, and but to find that kind of plasterwork, Art Deco light fixtures, listen to this, folks, mahogany-lined elevator. That's just crazy. I've never seen it. I'm anxious to see it.
It is a beautiful building, and as you mentioned, it's a hidden gem in our city. I can't remember who said this, but it's been described as part of the string of pearls on the Gateway Master Plan Mall, from all the way from the Jefferson National Memorial, which is, of course, the Arch, to Luther Ely Smith Park, to the courthouse, to Keener Plaza, to City Garden and the courthouse, and then on to Memorial Plaza, which is the 7 city blocks of parks around Soldiers Memorial. So we're very excited about being a part of that master plan for the Gateway Mall improvements. It is a classically inspired building with Art Deco flourishes. As you mentioned, it has Art Deco themed grills on the windows, which were carefully preserved. In addition, if you were to look at a typical classical building with massive limestone piers, you wouldn't see the type of Art Deco fluting that was included in this particular building. So, as you mentioned, it's a very Art Deco feeling. Then on the inside, and by the way, a lot of people I talked to during design said, "Oh yeah, I've driven past Soldiers Memorial. Can you actually go in there?" So it's unique in that it is both a memorial and a museum, but a lot of people just weren't aware that you could actually go in there. And as you mentioned, in the interior, there's a lot of beautiful marble, terrazzo, plasterwork, very skillfully painted plaster friezes in the ceilings, woodwork, and it was just very well executed by the original architects and contractors back in the 1930s.
So, Karen, how does Missouri History Museum get involved with this particular project? I kind of know you guys have such a great track record of the history in our community, in our city, in our state. And actually, folks, I'll give kudos to them maybe in the second half of the hour here and read to you how important the Missouri History Museum is to our country. So, Karen, how does the Missouri History Museum get involved in this project?
We were first contacted about 2013 about whether or not we'd be interested in exploring the operation and management of the Soldiers Memorial. As Jim mentioned, it's a city-owned building, and with all of the responsibilities that the city of St. Louis has, they didn't really have the funding to manage the Soldiers Memorial the way that it should should be managed. So they were looking for a partner. And we started looking at it, and we actually spent about a year and a half with due diligence, taking a look about what would be involved with operating it, the sort of renovations that would be needed, and whether it was something that made sense, for the Missouri Historical Society to become involved with. And one of the first things that we realized, because the city, while they had excellent staff working at the building, only had 2 individuals trying to manage the entire Soldiers Memorial
Wow.
building, keeping it open, and that's just about all that 2 people can do. And so we started looking at the collections and at the building and realizing that no matter who ended up operating Soldiers Memorial, that an extensive inventory of the collections was needed, rehousing of the collections. As Jim had mentioned, there was no working HVAC really in the building. There was heat, but it couldn't be controlled, and that is not good for artifacts. And so we entered into discussions with the city and offered to manage a project where we would bring in professional staff to inventory the Soldiers Memorial collections and rehouse it. And this is an example of an absolutely incredible public-private partnership, because the city agreed to provide us with space, raw space in a city-owned building, that if we would renovate it, that we could have it for the long term for the storage of the processing of the Soldiers Memorial collections. And so that project actually started in the summer of 2014. And we started working to establish intellectual control. For the first time, everything was going to be counted and photographed and measured and carefully placed in storage where it could be protected. Then, as that went forward, we continued with our due diligence and looking into what was needed with the building, meeting with people like Jim and Jean, talking with other downtown cultural organizations, and St. Louis is really fortunate to have incredibly philanthropic individuals that support the activities of this region. And we entered in discussions, and it was determined that if we were willing to take over the management and operations, that private individuals in St. Louis who chose to be anonymous because they wanted it to be about soldiers rather than about them, that they would fund the renovation of the building under our management. So all sorts of things had to fall into place.
So folks need to understand that this is all privately funded.
All privately funded.
And you have to have a real heart for, like you said, giving or benevolence or philanthropic work. And St. Louis is I think, well known for that, to do that, and especially to preserve some of these kinds of artifacts and to tell a history in a memorial situation for those individuals who have served our country. And I did say I was going to mention this at the next half hour, but it's worth saying right now that the Missouri Historical Society serves as the confluence of historical perspectives and contemporary issues, collecting for more than 150 years. The Missouri Historical Society Regional History Institution. Houses one of the largest collections of artifacts and historical materials of any regional history institution in the United States. That's crazy incredible. And they're right here in our backyard. And here we're going to have another memorial museum that will just be another shining star for people to come to St. Louis and people in St. Louis to really brag about their town. Because
Exactly.
we should brag about our town. Now, when you guys met to talk about the integration of the physical plant of the facility and all the aspects that go along with that, and the what I would guess is the artifact, the museum portion, what are those meetings like? How does that mesh together? You're like, well, we need this and we need this, or no, we can't do that. We can't do. Now, I know there's give and take, but obviously the HVAC was a huge deal, and controlling that, and the accessibility was a huge deal. But other than that, and I know you wanted the building to look nice, because if you have a nice collection, you want it to look nice, you want to present something. What were those meetings like?
On the architecture side, that is an interesting question. On the architecture side, we were preserving the building and shaping what would be the galleries for the collection, for the exhibitions. But what we didn't know was, well, what's going to be in there, and what are the needs to support those, whether it's lighting or power or data. So we couldn't wait until Karen's team came in with their preliminary designs, because we were doing this simultaneously and we had a contractor on board and they wanted to build something. So we were kind of probably impatient to get that information. So we had to kind of settle down and kind of wait until we could get that information. So it was an interesting process, and it's been so fun even as the building is under construction to see the Missouri Historical Society's exhibition consultant continue with their work and actually fill it in, and their own staff, of course, to help tell the story of these soldiers that are really the purpose of having this facility in the first place.
So, Karen, on your end, do you agree? I'm not going to say, do you agree with Jim? Or do you disagree with Jim?
I think we had an excellent team, and it's an interesting situation because even though the city of St. Louis owns the building and the collections, the Board of Aldermen passed an ordinance that allowed the city to enter into an operating agreement for the Historical Society to be responsible for not only the renovation and revitalization, but the long-term operation. And so basically we were the client for the renovation and revitalization. And so we were able to bring to the table the knowledge of what's needed, for a modern museum facility, because the original design was actually done in the 1920s, even though it wasn't built until the 1930s. And visitor service amenities back then were very different than what they are today.
Well, folks, you're listening to KWRH-LP 92.9 FM. This is In Tune with Arnold Stricker and Ellie Wharton. We've been talking about the Missouri History Museum role with Mackey Mitchell Architects on the Soldiers Memorial renovation that has been going on for the last 2 years, a $30 million renovation. State-of-the-art facility. If you have some questions you'd like to text in, please call our text line 314-736-4510, 314-736-4510 if you have some questions. So we're going to get in the second half of our hour, we're going to talk a little bit more specifics on the details of and I'm sure we're going to bring Erik in the discussion because he's probably the one that's been moving the mouse around on the CAD drawings and making sure all that stuff's done. And I would be kind of curious if the original plans were there and how that aided you guys in that particular development. So this is Arnold Stricker of In Tune. You're listening to KWRH LP 92.9 FM, your community radio station in Webster Groves, Missouri. We'll be right back. Welcome back to In Tune. This is Arnold Stricker. We have some folks from the Missouri History Museum and also from Mackey Mitchell Architects here talking about the exciting things that are happening at the Soldiers Memorial Military Museum, which will be reopening November 3rd after being closed for 2 years on a $30 million renovation. Karen Goering from the Missouri History Museum, Jim Conrad and Erik Biggs from Mackey Mitchell architects are here, and this is an innovative public-private partnership through the Missouri Historical Society, and they're leading a multi-million-dollar revitalization of the Soldiers Memorial Military Museum and Court of Honor. And the Court of Honor we're going to talk about, that's a whole other separate deal, folks. We talked about that off air, but that's another discussion, and that's a great place also. It's right off the history, Soldiers Memorial area. So it's going to reopen November 3rd and will feature greatly expanded exhibitions and meet the highest museum standards to be fully accessible to visitors. So if you have a physical, a visual, now I'm not sure about an auditory, yes, an auditory disability, you are taken care of. And that's tremendous. And I look at this picture of the before and after of how all of the coal, smoke and exhaust that's been cleaned off this building, it looks great. So we were talking before break about what it was going to be like to now grab some old plans that were designed, as Karen was telling us, in the 20s, and the building wasn't built till 38, is that right?
Completed in 38, started in 36.
Started in 36 and completed in 38. And now, Erik, did you get a chance to see those? And they were probably really real blueprints.
They actually were, yeah.
And then you convert it to CAD. Did you do that, or how did you go about then with your skill set?
We referenced those drawings, which we're very lucky to have, in the actual original layout of the building. It's kind of funny that it was 20 sheets, and in reference for what we use today, it was over 200. It's just amazing what they could get done back then with such little information. But yeah, no, we had the original blueprints that we used, which were just immaculate.
Now, the original architect, did they detail, and obviously 20 pages, they're not going to detail it like is done today because of code changes and other kinds of regulations that have changed. But when they go to do something like that, and I know you guys, it's like a big scanner or big Xerox machine where you put it then into your CAD. What kind of things surprised you looking at those old plans, other than like, well, these really aren't detailed, or maybe?
Oh, no, they were. What surprised me is how often I could go back and reference them.
Really?
Because, wall cavities, things that we really needed to get into to get the mechanical systems up to date were things that we couldn't see. They were all hidden conditions. There were things behind the granite wall in the plaster. So we really needed to rely on these drawings to kind of get an idea of the space in the cavities that we could actually use for air return and air flow. And that's just one example of the times that I've needed to go back and reference those original drawings.
So were they as built, or were they just like the original set without any kind of modifications that were done when it was built?
They were the original drawings. Yeah.
So you maybe found some, that wasn't exactly what was on the plans.
Very minor, very minor. An example of things that had not been fleshed out yet that weren't on the drawings would have been the 4 allegorical statues that are in front of the building.
Okay.
They were kind of more, I think they had just drawn horses as opposed to...
and doughboys.
What's it? Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so things like that. But really, I'd have to say I found very little difference between what was actually in the drawings and what was in front of us.
Now, I'm kind of curious because of the mosaic ceiling. Did they have a plan for that, or did they just say a mosaic ceiling with this kind of look, and then it's left to the artisan to put that up there?
They had a sketch of the ceiling, and the way, because there's 20 pages, they actually did it where a floor plan was cut in half, and you'd see half a reflected ceiling plan. And I'm sorry if I'm getting too technical.
No.
Okay. But you'd see half a reflected ceiling plan and then half a floor plan. So you would actually see half of the sketch of the mosaic, which is above the loggia, which is really where you first enter the building. So before you actually step into the building itself, you're kind of in this open area called a loggia, and you look up and you see the Gold Star Mother's mosaic, and that was actually hand sketched in the drawings. Now,
as you go in, there's this what's that big thing called as a monument to
the cenotaph?
Say that again.
The cenotaph.
Cenotaph, and it represents.
It's a tomb-like structure.
Okay.
And the Soldiers Memorial was originally built as a memorial to all those that gave the ultimate sacrifice in World War I. So they have all of the names of those who lost their lives from the greater St. Louis area inscribed onto the black marble of the cenotaph.
Okay, and below in the basement, which people like myself, when my wife and I went to visit, we couldn't get down there because it was off limits.
Yeah.
And who knows what it was like? If it was like the basement of most old buildings, it was probably wet and damp and moldy and all that kind of stuff like that.
That's about right. Yeah.
But now it's designed to hold special events or kind of situations that are going on down there?
Yeah, part of the renovation was actually to increase the amount of exhibit space in the building. There were always the two main galleries on the first level. And what the basement was before was storage, and it had some miscellaneous uses, but nothing that...
And emergency management.
Yeah, exactly. One of those miscellaneous uses, emergency management. So really we wanted to change the program of what that really was. We basically removed all of the interior walls of the basement and really opened it up, which allows for what I believe is the temporary, I'm doing air quotes right now, exhibits for the building. And I say temporary because I believe the first one's for 2 years.
2 to 3.
2 to 3.
And that temporary exhibit's going to be what, Karen?
St. Louis and the Great War. And so it's going to be an in-depth look at St. Louis in World War I, both on the home front, the mobilization, and where St. Louisans served overseas, and then also looking at the legacies of World War I in the St. Louis area. By completely gutting the lower level, and we even excavated further down that the ceiling heights would be appropriate for exhibition space. We were able to add a 4,300 square foot exhibition gallery, which will allow us to really get into the topics.
Okay, that's interesting. Now, is there a second floor? Like, is there an elevator up?
There is.
And what's up there?
That actually, there is an existing assembly room, which is beautiful. The same wood mahogany that lined the elevator lines this room that's on the west side of the building. And I will add, part of the things that we had done in the renovation is we wanted to make it a little bit more open and more of a flexible space. So there were fixed seating in there that was removed, and part of the reason in doing that, other than the opportunity for more flexibility in the room, was the condition of the seats. They just over time, over 80 some odd years, they needed to go. So
with a ventilation and heating system that really didn't work.
That's right. Yeah, that's right. Exactly. But then the other program that we have on the second floor are meeting rooms. And that's actually kind of holding to the original design of the building. So the program itself hadn't actually changed for the second floor. One of the things that we did do, I know accessibility has been brought up, and the original building had no way for anyone that wouldn't be able to get up let me back up. There are 2 levels to the second floor. The assembly room is actually about 4 feet lower than the rest of the second floor, with a set of stairs that goes up to it, and you kind of walk above the loggia and the mosaic I was just talking about. But there was no way for anyone in the assembly room who couldn't take the stairs to get up into where the restrooms were actually located. So it was a huge, just a detriment to anyone that the issues of accessibility. It was a big issue, I guess is what I'm trying to say. So one of the things that we did is we had a very nice lift installed for the stairs themselves, but we also added a second elevator that runs from the east gallery all the way from the basement into this higher level. So there are actually 2 means of accessibility to get to that second level.
Okay. Yeah, the elevator wasn't working when I was there either. it was like on its last legs or something like that. So a ramp for accessibility from the outside was built on the east end?
Correct.
Of
That's correct, yeah.
And is that the east end that would come in on the south? Does it kind of ramp up to the south end?
That's correct. Yeah,
Okay.
it's very open to the Court of Honor and everything that's happening to the south of the building. So it's a very visible way for people to enter the building. It connects from Chestnut to what is a podium area before you actually take the second set of stairs into the first level of the Soldiers Memorial. And there's a ramp for both.
Okay. Now, Karen, how do you decide what is going to be on display? Because I know there is a boatload of artifacts, and going through and sometimes you want something that looks good, but something has historical value, and something may have some sentimental value. And this is all St. Louis oriented.
Yes.
It's not like, we're getting things from Pasadena, California, or Madison, Wisconsin, or something like that. I just threw those names out just out of the top of my head. But it's all St. Louis oriented. How do you decide what artifacts are on display and which ones then you would rotate?
Sure. We have a team, that works on that. Most of them are on the staff at the Historical Society. Some of them are actually working full time now at Soldiers, and we've been working over the course of the last 3 years on the interpretation. And you mentioned that this is a St. Louis story, and that is one of the guiding principles. We want to look at service, military service, but through a St. Louis lens. And so when you go to the World War II Memorial in New Orleans or to the World War I National Museum in Kansas City, you're looking at, the whole story from the United States point of view. This is looking at St. Louisans serving their country with that St. Louis point of view. And so we have looked at the artifacts that were available, but we've also looked at the stories. And sometimes we've gone out and solicited artifacts, searched out descendants to try to collect the artifacts to support the stories about St. Louis. And we're going all the way from the Revolutionary War battle that was fought here in St. Louis to the present time in the St. Louis in-service galleries.
Wow, and that kind of segues to this Court of Honor, that there's going to be artifacts that are celebrating really St. Louisans or St. Louis history throughout how the war has impacted St. Louisans. But the Court of Honor is, and correct me if I'm wrong, south, in
That's
between what the memorial and City Hall, and it's kind of like a green space, and there's a reflecting pool. Talk about that, because there's separate monuments that are set up or memorials set up for Vietnam and Korea and World War II, maybe. I'm not quite sure, so help me out with that.
Sure. I'd like to start just by kind of giving our firm's personal connection with the Court of Honor, which is one of the founding principals. Gene Mackey, his father was the designer of the Court of Honor.
Wow.
So it was very special to have Gene's input on what we were going to do for the design, and it was, from my understanding, Gene's father's original design intent to have a reflecting pool in the Court of Honor, and so we were almost able to kind of fulfill the original design with this project, which is extra special, and so Gene's input was invaluable, and it was, this whole thing kind of became like a passion project for him prior to his passing.
I think a lot of people, including myself, you go down there and there's, St. Louis Barbecue Fest or something, or some concert that's on the steps, or taking that whole area. I never knew about that whole Court of Honor area, to be honest with you.
I think that's completely fair. And to tell you the truth, I don't think I did either. And so I think one of the things that we really wanted to try to take control of with this project was having that connection between the Soldiers Memorial Building and the Court of Honor. And we did that with the introduction of a memorial lawn, and then the kind of memorial walkways with the program of having individual memorial walls with the same intent. Let me back up. The Court of Honor is actually in the same way that the Soldiers Memorial Building, a memorial for those in World War II that made the ultimate sacrifice. And along the edge of the area, there are inscribed the names of those who lost their lives. So with these memorial walkways and these memorial walls that have been kind of designed for this project, we're taking into account Vietnam and Korea, as well as future conflicts.
Now, is that Chestnut Street there that was narrowed because of trying to maintain a flavor and a feel, and to kind of keep this as I don't want to call it a sacred ground, but an area that was honored more and respected more, and so there's not going to be any concerts there or barbecue things or going on in the future, right?
That's correct. Part of the ordinance that gave the management of those two city blocks to the Historical Society gives us the authority to determine that. And the things that occur between Market and Pine and 13th and 14th in the future are going to be mission related. They're going to honor veterans. They're going to be educational in nature, or in some cases ceremonial to honor service.
You know, I'm really pleased that the city, realizing they can't keep this up, and the whole thing's deteriorating to a point before it goes to a point where it has to be torn down or closed, that they decided to really look and reach out to team up with the Historical Society in a joint project to do this. Is that something that has previously been done, or has that been something that's been done to your knowledge in other cities like that, or is this kind of a first?
It's been done other places as well, but it's worked very, very well here. And the city remains very interested and very supportive of what we're doing. There is still a Soldiers Memorial Commission that is appointed by the mayor and other elected officials that help advise us on various activities. And it's working out to be just, as I said earlier, a really great public-private partnership.
You know, that's nice to hear, because many times you hear of groups getting together and everybody wants to protect their turf or their unique little projects, or, you know, that's my family's artifacts, why aren't those on display, or things like that. And you have to give some things up for the greater good to acknowledge, hey, there's a bigger vision for this, and there's something that can come out of this that's going to be much, much better. And I know the city retains ownership of the facility, yet you all have really what I would call the management responsibilities,
right,
and the authority to, because of the passage of from what the Board of Aldermen did. That's very, very interesting. Coming back to the building, energy efficiencies. You know, no great architect would allow a facility like this to go by without trying to implement some kind of energy efficiencies. What kind of efficiencies are those?
Well, for an overall view, we actually are going for a LEED certification, and LEED stands for Leadership in Energy and Environmental Design. And in doing that, part of what that involves is a more efficient HVAC system, which we had talked about. All of the light fixtures had been refurbished with LEDs, and we're and in doing that, obviously reducing the energy consumption of the building. All of the plumbing fixtures are low flow, and really kind of just going down the checklist of what it means to be a LEED certified building. Some other innovations or things that we were able to incorporate that usually take up more energy, and we were able to do is actually keeping most of the interior finishes, or if we're not doing that, using easily renewable finishes. We have cork floor throughout the second floor, which does qualify for that. It's really kind of been an amazing thing to be able to incorporate this new way of thinking into such an old building.
Now, this may be something you can or cannot do, but are like the original facade looks of the plans going to be printed out so you can buy some kind of copy of what it looked like? Or is there, I think this would be a great book on how this whole process has come together, because it really is a model, I think, for many other public institutions and cities that are faced with many things that they own that are deteriorating. They don't have the funding then to support that, and partnering up with a private entity that, especially like the one we have in our city, can do the things that they do. But is that something that has been talked about? A book, or maybe the facade pictures of the old blueprints that are printed out, so when you go through, oh yeah, I'll take one of those and give me that in 11 by 14 or something like that.
I'd buy one. The blueprints
you can print
are
one
amazing.
off. Don't want to give any secret histories out on where to get in the building or what's located where. But is that something you guys are thinking about, or?
It's actually something we've been discussing. It's not currently underway, but the building is such an architectural treasure, and just the examples of where things changed from the original design, as Erik mentioned earlier. The original architectural drawings showed a very Art Deco winged horse with a doughboy that was just repeated 4 times.
Oh, wow.
And when the award was originally made for the sculptural work for Soldiers Memorial, they hired an individual that they later had to fire because he didn't do anything. But the great thing about that was when they put it out the second time, they hired Walker Hancock, a local St. Louisan.
And folks, you'll have to stay tuned to the second hour to hear about Walker Hancock, a St. Louisan, and the things that he's done. But those sculptures that you see on the outside, they are magnificent. And this is not some minor league sculptor.
No.
This is like the deal here. This guy was the deal.
He's incredible.
He is very incredible. You also need to stay tuned for we're going to continue this, and I've begged them to stay off the air. I said, there's so much material here. I don't want to limit it, and I want to give it justice. But the grand reopening ceremony that's going to take place on November 3rd is going to feature as the keynote speaker another St. Louis native, a graduate of Bishop DeBerg, and it's Brigadier General Jeannie Levette. And she's going to be speaking, and we're going to talk about her and how you all came about getting her to speak and her significance in her role as the United States Air Force's first female fighter pilot and the first woman to command a United States Air Force combat fighter wing. So that's a huge deal. That's a huge deal. You guys are doing some unbelievable work, and it's great to see this partnership on how that works. If we had somebody from the Board of Aldermen, I'd be giving them some kudos also. And it's great to see the interaction of that working together. So you're listening to In Tune with Arnold Stricker and Ellie Wharton on KWRH LP 92.9 FM. We've been talking to our folks from the Missouri Historical Society, Karen Goering, and from Mackey Mitchell Architects, that's Jim Conrad, and you've been listening to Erik Biggs most recently on the voices here. So this is a discussion about the reopening of the Soldiers Memorial Military Museum and what's been going on that architecturally and on the interior as it relates to artifacts and the history portion of that. There's some great, I have a bookmark in front of me that I got at a recent activity that the Missouri Historical Society had a booth set up and hauled this down. It's great. It's my little souvenir that I took home. So this is Arnold Stricker of In Tune. You're listening to KWRH-LP 92.9 FM, your community radio station in Webster Groves, Missouri. Please stay tuned to our second hour. Welcome back to In Tune. This is Arnold Stricker on KWRH-LP 92.9. We're taking you back to 1938 when the Soldiers Memorial Building was opened up in St. Louis City, and we're taking you now forward to a time when we're going to have a rededication of that and a grand reopening ceremony of that facility. We're talking to project manager Jim Conrad from Mackey Mitchell Architects and also Karen Goering from the Missouri Historical Society. I always kind of refer to you guys as Missouri History Museum.
That's fine.
And Erik Biggs also from the Mackey Mitchell Architects. So the opening ceremony, it kicks off a week-long series of Veterans Day events. So let's first of all talk about what's the significance of November 3rd in having the grand reopening, just for some people who don't know.
Well, actually, we wanted to open a week before Veterans Day. And so the November 3rd date was chosen so that we could lead up to the 100th anniversary of the armistice, which, of course, will be November 11th. And so we're starting at 9 o'clock in the morning on November 3rd. People are invited to come downtown. There will be a military band performing at 9 a.m. while people are gathering. And the ceremony itself will begin at 10 to formally rededicate the Soldiers Memorial and the Court of Honor. We're really honored that Brigadier General Jeannie Leavitt has accepted our invitation to be the keynote speaker. And, she was one of our top choices, and we were just thrilled that she was willing to come. She grew up in St. Louis. She went to high school here at Bishop DuBourg, and later set up all sorts of records. She's the first woman fighter pilot. She was the first woman to command a fighter squadron. And the fun fact, she's currently has been helping Brie Larson with her training for a popular movie that's coming out in the spring.
March 8th of 2019.
Okay, very good. But this is someone who has received just an incredible amount of honors, and we're just so proud that she's a native St. Louisan and that she's coming back to rededicate Soldiers Memorial.
That will be, listening to her, she, and just so you understand what a command pilot does, with more than 3,000 hours, that's how much experience she has, more than 3,000 hours. Her experiences have included operations in Southern Watch, Northern Watch, Iraqi Freedom, Enduring Freedom, and she's currently the commander of the Air Force Recruiting Service at the Joint Base at San Antonio, Randolph, Texas. And this reopening ceremony, as Karen was saying, on the 3rd, beginning at 9 o'clock with the band playing, it follows with the opening ceremony at 10 and opening then to the public at 11. And the first 5,000 visitors that Saturday will receive a commemorative pin. So all of those collective commemorative pin people out there, you need to be one of the first 5,000 people. The U.S. Postal Service is getting into the show, too. They're going to conduct a stamp cancellation commemorating the grand reopening from 11 to 1. There will be some food trucks available from 8 to 2 there. And it's a week-long series of events that also include a flag raising and lowering ceremonies. Visitors can walk through the Court of Honor at that time. There's a full history of the Brigadier General Jeannie Leavitt's biography is going to be available. So really, really big deal. Now, are you guys from Mackey Mitchell going to be speaking and representing? Putting a couple 2 words there also.
Well, we'll certainly be in attendance. And what I was thinking about while you were talking is, during design, the Missouri Historical Society has provided a lot of really interesting and impressive photographs of the building through its history. And it's so impressive to see the number of people who would attend events, 50 years ago, 60 years ago. So I'm hoping at our November the 3rd grand reopening, we have an equally large crowd in attendance at that ceremony to support this grand reopening.
So when you're saying that, Jim, you're saying that there were tens of thousands of people there?
I don't know how many people were there, but there was just streets filled with people. It was just very impressive.
Okay, folks, we need to fill the streets down there, not like it's a barbecue event, or because you're not going to get any food other than the food trucks down there, or not like it's a concert, but you need to show up like that. But it's not a concert and it's not a barbecue event, but it's an event to really re-honor the memories and the sacrifice that St. Louisans have made in all wars that are being honored at the Soldiers Memorial. What are some closing thoughts that you all have as you've gone through this process? Excuse me. Sometimes it will change some thinking. Sometimes it will reinforce some thinking, or sometimes there'll be like an aha, or gee, I didn't know that about this thing, and that was like your biggest aha moment. What are some of those things that each of you have experienced in this process that's gone on really since like 2014?
I think, it was mentioned earlier that this is one of those hidden treasures that most St. Louisans are not aware of. And I think when people come November 3rd and thereafter, I think they're going to be blown away by Soldiers Memorial. It is so incredible. From the Gold Star Mother's mosaic on the ceiling of the loggia to the Walker Hancock monumental, limestone sculptures, to the learning about St. Louisans that really impacted the entire country. People talk about O'Hare Airport and they don't realize that it's named after Edward Butch O'Hare, a St. Louisan that was one of the most decorated fighter pilots during World War II. And his story will be told at Soldiers Memorial. Wendell Pruitt, one of the highly decorated Tuskegee Airmen, was a St. Louis individual. There are so many stories that people can learn from, and I think that this is going to be an opportunity for people who are interested in St. Louis history to honor those that have come before them, but even people who maybe would have never thought about visiting the Soldiers Memorial. I think this is going to be a place where they will visit and they'll want to bring other people, because it will not just be the exhibits. There will also be programs. The first week we're open, we're having a play, All Is Calm, about the 1914 Christmas armistice, where the soldiers just said, we're not going to fight. It's Christmas Day. And it's going to give people, just an opportunity to view all of this in a new and very personal way.
That last statement you just made, a new and personal way, because everybody sees things differently and are impacted and affected by things differently, and they bring their experiences to these things. Some people who have fought may be emotional. Some people who maybe had a loved one who died maybe have a different kind of emotional investment when they see a name that's their name related to them. And some people who don't know, it should impact them some way.
Yes.
As to what's going on. Jim, how about you?
What I was thinking about is, over the past couple of years, working with the contractors who were doing all of the construction for the renovation, just watching how they approach their work. The guys who lay drain tile under the floor slab, just hundreds of people who were involved, and really seeing them take ownership of the project more than other projects that they worked on. This was, I think, to a lot of people special. So I think it's really been interesting and gratifying to see how they have invested some emotion into the project. And just walking through the construction site with various people, for example, I didn't know until one of our architects was walking through with us that said, oh, my grandfather's name is over on that wall in the Court of Honor. And walking to the building with one of our consulting engineers past the merchant marine anchor saying, oh yeah, my grandfather was a merchant marine. Just all these connections like Karen mentioned that don't come out until people interact and visit the memorial and are able to tell those stories. Maybe things they've forgotten.
That's very interesting, because construction of buildings and things like that, we're putting this up, okay, we're moving on to the next project, but when you know what it's about, the history of what has been there and what it will be, and you want it to be, you can go there and say, I helped build this, or my dad helped build this, or my mom helped build this, or my grandparents helped build this. In some way, gives some kind of pride, and I can really understand that it's a project to be proud of.
And we talked earlier about sustainability. There's nothing more sustainable about a building than one that'll last 100 years or 150 years. So what we're doing today is going to be serving people who haven't been born yet.
That's correct. Erik, what about you?
Well, I have to say, pardon me.
No, you're good.
I think my biggest takeaway really comes within the building itself. Despite having been visiting there for over 2 years, for reviewing the existing drawings, for doing the drawings, I still go in there and I see things that I didn't notice before. I mean, that still happens. And if I'm still doing that, I couldn't really imagine the people that will be visiting the building. I mean, there's just so much to really take in. I think it's very special, and I think people are really going to enjoy it.
Now, just, Karen, to review, there is no charge.
It's free.
And there may be at some point on a special exhibit that there may be a charge fee, or no?
I suppose it's possible, but we're going to try to always keep it free.
Okay, so as a typical St. Louis great museum city, and we've got the zoo, we've got the Missouri History Museum, we've got all the art museums that are free. Here's another one, folks.
That's
free.
correct.
You're not going to spend a dime, except maybe a couple coins in getting down there and parking, and you're going to have a great museum and memorial that you can take a look at. I know Jim mentioned something about the interaction, and I had this question, I forgot to ask it earlier. Many times exhibits are just kind of a one-way deal. In other words, they just give you information, or you're looking at, a helmet or, army boots or something like that. How interactive is this particular museum memorial going to be?
There are a number of components that are interactive. And for example, I mentioned earlier that it starts with the Revolutionary War battle and then comes to the present time. In the section, for example, about the Civil War, people will learn about the gunboats that were designed by James Eads,
right,
and built down in Carondelet. And there will actually be an interactive where people can build a gunboat and learn about the components. We want this museum and the exhibits to reach everyone, and so there are touchables throughout the project. We've done 3D scanning of the Walker Hancock sculptures, and so there will be 14-inch tall models that people can handle, for people with low vision or who are blind. We're using Braille in a number of areas, and there will be an opportunity, for example, we have a kiosk where people can enter information. They can enter a name, and biographical information will come up for anyone who's on whose name is inscribed in the cenotaph or in the court of honor, so that they can learn something about that individual. And so there will be a number of opportunities for people to learn more and to actively engage in interactive learning.
Jim, did you know about that last thing?
I learned a little bit there, but Karen, you also might mention the oral history room.
the particularly in the exhibit of St. Louisans in Service, World War II to the present, we're using a lot of oral histories in the exhibition. So first-person accounts told by the individuals that served. And we have created on the lower level a room that's just dedicated to oral history in the future, where an oral historian can sit down with someone and they can share the story, and we can record it so that it will be available in the individual's own words for future researchers.
That's a very valuable thing, especially for our World War II veterans who are declining in numbers daily.
Yes, they are.
And to know some of the stories that they have, and the some of the situations that they've been in, in the parade that we have in the summertime. It's the Battle of the Bulge group,
Yes.
and they come through on their little half track, and it's great to see them. They always get a big standing ovation, but there's always fewer and fewer of them each July 4th on the parade, and their story, their personal investment in what they did in serving our country will get lost if it's not recorded, either in writing or in an audio form, or a video form for that matter.
One of the things I look forward to also is whenever we finish a project, it's always interesting to watch how our client moves in and takes ownership and starts furnishing it and making it their own. And I'm looking forward to the memorial lawn area at the Court of Honor to see what kind of programming evolves, how people experience it. As we mentioned, the Court of Honor is going to be a very reflective and meditative space. So that in a way it's interactive as well, because people will have a destination where they can just reflect on what they've seen and what people have done before us.
It'll be a place where people can go, not to eat their lunch, but I want to get away from work for a little bit. I don't know if you guys are close enough that you can just walk over there and just kind of have a little chill time and relax a little bit from the hectic pace that goes on in many offices, and kind of get your thoughts and everything together and go back and be a little bit more relaxed.
Definitely.
That's great. I really appreciate all of you coming in today. This is a marvelous opportunity for our community and the greater St. Louis area. So folks, just as a reminder, on November the 3rd, the rededication, the re-grand opening ceremony for the Soldiers Memorial Military Museum will take place beginning at 9 o'clock, where there's some music will be playing. At 10 o'clock, the ceremony will actually start with Brigadier General Jeannie Levette as the keynote speaker, and then the museum memorial will be open at 11 for the public. We need to turn out, folks. St. Louis needs to turn out for this, and let's have a picture taken that surpasses all the previous pictures that Jim was talking about that he saw, and so we can add that to the list, and people will go in the future, they'll go back and say, man, in 2018 when they rededicated that place and reopened it, the St. Louis people showed up. They really supported what was going on.
Fill those streets.
It would be great. So we appreciate you coming in today and being our guests, and I thank you very much also for taking extra time and going over into the second hour to talk about this. It's been extremely beneficial and really rewarding, and I hope our listeners feel the same way.